Welcome. And with us today on the Homeschool How To, I have Nicole Goff. She has been homeschooling for over 2 decades and was homeschooled for a portion of her education. So welcome, Nicole. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to do this.
So let's go back to your childhood. What made your parents decide to homeschool you?
Well, my parents fall under the hippie homeschooler category and kind of anti-government, anti-institution, and so they just kind of knew better to keep me away from all the things. So I grew up out in the woods on a little. We had horses. It wasn't really a farm, but we gardened. We had horses and chickens. Yeah, so it was very like. Unschooling or nature based for the beginning of my school years. And then as I got older, I had tutors. We had a homeschool cooperative. I did go to public school for 2 years, eighth and ninth grade, which was not the best years as a 13 and 14-year-old to choose to go into the system. I can say that. And then I went back to homeschooling after that.
Oh, that's super interesting. So what were some of the reasons that made you go back? Because you lasted 2 years. I mean, it's better than 2 months, right? But what made you decide that you want to go back to the homeschooling world?
Kids are mean.
Yeah. Even back even back then, I mean, I'm not trying to say you're old. I'm
Yeah.
41, but
Oh, me
yeah,
too.
is
Yeah,
that
no, it was back then. It was in the 90s. And yeah, no, I experienced a lot of judgment for kind of just who I was and how I was. And then I experienced some interpersonal trauma with some people, and I just yeah, didn't really feel safe in that environment.
so it was more the social aspect versus like the uh, educational purposes or just, oh, I have to sit here for 8 hours or 6 hours and why?
To be honest, I loved school and I ended up, I was in all the honors classes. Besides algebra, I guess that was a part that I hadn't really like gotten enough help with. But besides that, like I was in all honors classes and, I ended up getting my GED and going to college, going to university for 5 years, and was always 4.0, chancellor's list, all that stuff. So I was really good at school and I really liked that aspect. And I was always like teacher's pet. So yeah, it was just the social stuff. It wasn't that aspect at all. Although it was a lot of, like, why are we doing this sometimes? Like it seemed either too easy or like pointless, but I always did a good job. So
Yeah, so and I think that would be another question people would have was like, when you went back to school, were you behind? But you obviously were not at all.
and I'll tell you, this is the reason because I was taught how to learn.
So we hear that a lot. Can you explain to us what does that mean? What does it look like?
Well, I didn't have the model of memorizing for the test. So I actually knew how to inquire and study and find answers for myself and use my brain, use my creativity. Never had an IQ test done, but I imagine I would have done really well on one. It's just the ability to problem solve, to figure things out. And so that was what school was, given a problem and then you figured it out. And it was just very easy for me to do because I didn't have the programming.
Mhm, mhm. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just recently for me, I'm reading, there was a book called The Lilac Girls. It was very popular, best time seller, and, had to do with World War II. And it kind of led me thinking, at 41, I'm like, gee, they just tell us in school, like, World War II is about Hitler wanted a race of, all blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because this book is saying that they're taking Polish into concentration camps, and they're usually blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And, I'm Polish. I didn't even realize that Polish people were going into concentration camps and they were doing things like experiments on them. So to see like, hey, if a soldier got, something in his leg, bullet or whatever in his leg, they would like actually put just horrible things in their legs to see what would happen. How can an infection heal itself, and different ways that they could heal a really bad infection. So that was interesting. And it made me think like, I think there's more to this story than they told us in school. Why are they taking the blonde hair, blue eyed people and putting them in these camps? And then her second book, or maybe it's her third book. I'm reading now, I think it's called Sunflower Sisters, and it's about the Civil War. And we've always been taught North good, South bad. North wanted slave freedom for slaves, and South wanted the slaves. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense that everybody in the North happened to be an altruistically good person and everybody in the South happened to be a horrible, evil person. Could there be more to this story? And so I'm researching now, like, oh, okay, well, the North was industrialized. So they actually didn't benefit from any sort of slavery, and it had already been abolished in the North. They didn't like all the power the South was getting at the power in Congress, all the money that they were making because they were exporting their goods to Europe. They just had so much power in Congress that they had a lot of power on what laws were going to get passed. And they were like, hey, if we want our industrial society up in the North to work, we need actual workers that earn wages that can then put those wages back into society and it kind of make this whole cyclical thing go around. So it's interesting that the whole thing, it wasn't really about abolishing slavery because the North just didn't want the South to expand westward and gain even more power with the slavery that was going on. So I'm like, all right, well, that actually just makes more sense because it's like, how did all of the good people move to the North and all of the evil people move to the South? But they never taught us to think like that in school. And now that I'm educating my kids, I see things in such a different perspective. Like, let's dig a little deeper. And so I think that's what you're talking about when you say, like, I didn't learn what to think. I learned how to think. Does this make sense? Or is it just what they're telling me? So, yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. And yeah, I could do a whole podcast on that subject. I'm a big truther.
Yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
I will not teach my kids history. So history has been so adulterated in our system for the last couple hundred years. The history books have been manipulated. Every textbook that you read has been manipulated for a particular agenda. And so I won't even teach my kids history because so much of what we were taught is just factually dishonest. It's just untrue. And cosmology I won't teach the children. There's a lot of subjects. I tell them these are my ideas, but honestly nobody knows because it's been obfuscated.
Yeah. Right. And even going back to the Bible, like, how do we know that the Roman Empire was not forcing scribes to add a little bit, take a little bit out, the book of Enoch? So it makes it really hard to actually educate your children when you have gone down these rabbit holes. Even I was reading. I was reading a children's book to them yesterday. We're doing a unit study on stars, and they talked about like going to the moon, and I'm like, well, kids, I was like, if
Yeah.
you wanna believe that they had that sort of communication, you know, Papa lives 5 miles away, and we can't get service to his house when we call him on our cell phone. So, what do you think?
Yep. Yeah. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my kids too. It's like, using your deductive reasoning, using your intelligence, making your own conclusions about things rather than like, this is the narrative and it is the truth. And so much of science, the same thing. There's stuff about the dinosaurs and the age of the earth. And there's just so much that we have been misled, that the
Yeah.
science and has been falsified. And so yeah, I the basic stuff, like we do, like the chemistry and like, but when it comes to that kind of stuff, I always introduce it with a grain of salt. Like, well,
Yeah.
this is what these people say and this is what some other people say, and none of us were there, so we're not exactly sure. And here's some really far out ideas.
Yeah, it is hard, but I think that's a beautiful way of doing it. Here are some different opinions, and you can take the time when you're older or now or whatever to research, figure out what makes sense to you. That is awesome. So you ended up doing what did you end up doing after graduation?
Graduation from college, high school.
From university.
So I went back. I had my first daughter young, and so I ended up going back for my undergrad at 23, 24, and then I was going to go into a PhD program for psychology. and I met my current husband, and we ended up having 4 kids. So I never went back and got my PhD, and instead I have now become a coach. So
Oh, cool.
I really dodged a bullet because I already had $60,000 in student loan debt, which is, again, that's like a whole other podcast we could get into, why college is BS. But I really got disheartened with the system. You know, I worked under a professor who gave me inside knowledge about how scared she was of losing her tenure because of trying to teach the truth. And the university did not want this particular truth to be taught. And so she was so, she confided in me how she wanted to like give this knowledge. And it was things that she had been teaching. She was in her 60s and she had been teaching for like 35 years. And it was stuff she used to teach, and now all of a sudden it was, taboo or whatever. It was stuff she wasn't allowed to talk about anymore. This was in anthropology, and yeah, and that was concerning to me. And then things got weirder and weirder and weirder at college, and I was like, wow, my dreams of being a professor and being a PhD psychologist. I was just kind of like, I think I dodged a bullet. I would have had like $200,000 in student loan debt and been in a system where I was silenced.
Mhm,
So
mhm. Just yeah, all doctors, really. Okay, so that's interesting. So when did you decide that you wanted to homeschool your kids?
I knew forever. Yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't
there was
a
no
question.
question. There
Yeah.
was no question. My oldest daughter, we did a homeschool co-op from like, I think I started one in our hometown, Gainesville, Florida, when she was 4 years old, preschool age. And then when I moved down to South Florida to be with my current husband, joined another co op there. And she ended up having dyslexia, and I was having a really hard time teaching her to read. So in second grade, I put her in Waldorf, and she did Waldorf for, I think, 4 or 5 years. She did Waldorf. And then she went back to homeschooling once she was really like, caught up.
And yes, isn't well, was it Waldorf or Montessori? I mean, it must have been Montessori. And I write about the differences in my ebook, but it's still hard to pull the differences out. But people like I think it was Mark Zuckerberg that just got kind of put on blast that he has this Montessori group for his children and other children in his home. I think he was in trouble because there were too many of them there. But you don't use computers with that style of education. And yet he is famous for pushing the social media and now AI and into the schools. And it's really interesting.
Oh, well, you will find that all of those big tech guys do not allow their children to use social media and very, very severely limit their screen time. All of
Yeah,
them.
I've seen reels where they say that about video game makers too. And I don't know how true they are, but yeah, where they said like how, what age or how often would you let your child play, I don't know, Minecraft or I don't even know the video games that are out there because we're just not a video game family. My son's never really asked for it other than we have like a Nintendo 64 from when my husband was a kid. So he'll play Zelda sometimes. But I thought that was interesting because then so many people come to me too and say, like, why doesn't your son play? I think it's Minecraft. Is that the one where they build things and it actually probably has a lot of really good, I don't know, architectural or, building educational things to it. But then again, just like with Facebook or any of the social media, there's also probably a negative connotation to it too. So depending on how you use it.
Yeah, and it's very addictive. My older four are all girls, so the video game reality hasn't been really a thing. Girls don't seem to be as attracted to it in that way. So that's not, my youngest is the only boy, and he's only 2. So we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah.
But I know it can be extremely addictive. And I know there is also an aspect of chats where adults will interact with kids on these like chat room kind of things. So I'm not really sure how all that works, but I know there is a bit of a scary aspect to that.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem is that it went from 0 to 60, like us growing up as kids. I mean, I was like 17 when we started text messaging, and I was in college when Facebook came out. So, like the MySpace era to you had to have a college email address in order just to have a Facebook account. And I remember what a big deal it was years later when, like, oh my God, my mother's on Facebook. Like, So they opened it up to everybody, but it went from that to now we can't even keep up with all of the social media, like, apps that there are, and so how do I know which ones are messaging my child or not, or the video games that are messaging how is it any different? And you don't know who is behind that. It's really scary, and it's impossible for parents to keep up, and I think that is one of the most beautiful benefits of homeschooling is that most homeschoolers do not have the technology, they do not have the social media, they do not have the screens, so you are not in competition. Your kids are not coming to you saying their parents love them more and I'm left out of everything because you won't allow me to have this. It's really hard to do that in school, even for the parent that wants to be diligent. Your kid is getting left out of these conversations. I'm sure there's some aspect of loneliness or bullying or, making fun of because of it. That's really hard. I mean, I don't know. Have you your oldest is how old?
19.
19. So have you had to kind of walk that path with her?
Yeah, I have. And, unfortunately, it's out of my control at this point. So she is a mother herself. Her and her fiance moved out and had their own place for a while, and now they're back in our guest room currently. But it's out of my hands now. All I can do is try to be a good influence. But I see the screen addiction with her, and I see how it affects her. She's an artist, and she's involved in these online art communities where they buy, sell, trade digital art. And there's definitely, comparison and competition and this need to be something. And I see
Mm.
how it affects her mood and, affects her self esteem. But at this point, all I can do is just try to be there for her and try to, give her the wisdom. You know, she's a mom. She's about to be a married mom. She's about to get her own place again. And, I can't control her screen time. With the little ones, I have a 1 hour limit on they have a phone because unfortunately now we're at a time where we don't even have landlines anymore. And so when I am not here, if I leave them with their older sister with a babysitter, I want them to have a phone. And so I got them a phone, but I put a 1 hour time limit on it and I can check it. I have an app. I can see what they look at. Now, unfortunately now for her, it's out of my hands. But as a high school age kid, it wasn't quite as prevalent yet. So when she got her first cell phone and kind of entered into that world, it hadn't gotten as crazy as it is now,
Mm.
luckily. So it wasn't quite as difficult to navigate in those like earlier teen years with her because it wasn't quite as ubiquitous as it is now.
So talk to me about how you homeschooled 5 kids. I mean, obviously it wasn't all at once because she's a little bit older and you have a 2-year-old, but what does your day-to-day look like? I know you did co-ops, you've organized some yourself and have actually really accomplished a lot with that. So what did the day-to-day look like maybe 10 years ago versus now?
So 10 years ago, my second oldest is about to turn 11. So 10 years ago, that was when my eldest daughter was in the private Waldorf school. And so I put her right about the time her little sister was born. And that was part of that decision too, because I was feeling overwhelmed as a new mom again and couldn't give her as much as I wanted to. It was quite a transition. So, because it was just me and her for the first 6 years, I was a totally single solo mom for, just me and her. So it was all a big transition for her to be a big sister. So at that point, my day to day wasn't focused on homeschooling. But as my second daughter got older and I had, the other three siblings, we just have been very much into experiential learning. And so with my eldest, I made the mistake of trying to bring the school system into the home, which I
Mm.
see so often, even though
Oh yeah.
I didn't come from that system. Even though, I wasn't indoctrinated in that way, I still had this idea. And I guess as a young mom, like I wanted to prove something. And so I got the workbooks and the curriculum and, we sit down at this time and she's a very strong willed person. And we butted heads and it was such a fight. And so the second time around, when I started out with my second eldest, I really had the intention to let it be fun and let it be something that was focused on their loves, their interests, and not like because they're supposed to. And I had also learned because I worked in the Waldorf schools that my daughter attended
Mhm.
I became an assistant administrator. And so I really learned a lot about the Waldorf philosophy. And they don't even start teaching reading until 7 years old.
Right. Same as
And
Finland.
yep, because it actually inhibits their creativity. You know,
Mm,
it inhibits their imagination. And from birth until 7, they're supposed to be all in their imagination. And I realized what I had done by starting at, for pushing reading on her. And then the dyslexia diagnosis, I even went back and, I had to really reflect, did I do that to her? No, did I cause some kind of schism with trying to push so hard, trying to prove like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I can teach her how to read, and push those academics when her little brain just was not ready for that. So, I did a lot of self reflecting on that. And I just really focused on hands on experiential learning and, cooking, like baking is one of the best things for that. So we did a ton of baking because there's like, math and science and it's all reading and writing, writing out recipes. And my 11-year-old is like, she's an amazing baker at this point. She wants to start her own company. She bakes cookies and sells them. She bakes cakes for people's birthdays, and so she's like in the process of starting her own little bakery business, which is really great. But yeah, and it looked like a lot of going out in the yard and talking about bugs and flowers and gardening and raising animals. We had a homestead for many years and just, animal husbandry. I mean, there's so many things in our day-to-day lives that teach us and this hands-on experiential learning sticks with you.
mm,
When it's in a textbook and you're doing a worksheet and you're learning the, memorization words for the test, it's in one ear and out the other.
mhm,
As soon as your mind doesn't need that information, it lets it go.
mhm.
Versus when you're actually getting hands on live experiences with the world around you, with things you can manipulate, your body remembers that. You carry that through the rest of your life. And so, mostly what it's looked like is just having fun and following their curiosity. But along the homeschool co op, because I do think that the socialization aspect and the learning, especially how to get along with other people, and they have a lot of siblings, so there's a lot of practice there. But learning from others, not just from me, because I don't want to be their only teacher. I don't want my philosophy to be the only philosophy that they're exposed to. So starting homeschool co-ops and having other moms come and bring their knowledge, sometimes dads, mostly moms. We have had a few really good dads in the group too. So I established Four Corners Community School, which is the not-for-profit cooperative that I run now, in the very beginning of 2020.
Perfect.
I met my partner, Mandy Jones. You should have her on the podcast too. She's awesome. I met her in 2019, and the first week of 2020, we got together. We had kids the same age, and we're like, all right, let's start a homeschool cooperative locally. And then COVID, and then everybody got crazy. And so it was just like me and her and our kids, and all the parks were empty, and all the museums were empty, and everything was all the playgrounds. So for like the first year, it was just us, and then a couple moms kind of trickled in, meeting up several days a week, and it was actually really amazing because it was such a good experience for us. We just got the run of everything because everybody was scared to go out.
Even in Florida?
Yes, even in Florida. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, we joke about it now. We miss the good old days when we could go somewhere and it was like literally nobody in sight. We just even the beaches. I mean, like even the beaches people weren't going to. We're out here
Wow.
like, yeah, we have the whole beach to ourselves. So that's where it started. But then by 2021, we had gained some families. We found a schoolhouse, and it's just grown and grown. And now we're up to 32 families.
Wow.
Yeah, we meet 2 days a week. We're still using a public building. We rent a indoor pavilion over a lake. It's really beautiful, but we still use a public facility. But right now, we're looking for our own land, and we want to build a schoolhouse. Really, we're all about bringing the community in. So the idea of it being a community school, we bring the community in to get involved to teach classes. We keep our fees are like super super low, and it's all run on volunteer work. All of we do as a not-for-profit, we do a bunch of different fundraisers to pay for field trips, to pay for supplies. And it's really just like all hands on deck. And the parents all take turns teaching classes. And so we get a big variety. Right now, one of the dads is teaching sprouting to the kids.
Ooh,
So
like
yes, yesterday we
growing
did.
sprouts?
Yesterday they grew wheatgrass over the last few weeks. They grew trays of wheatgrass, and yesterday he brought in his juicer and did wheatgrass shots for everybody. It was,
No, that's funny that you say that because I think I must have been watching one of the docuseries, The Truth About Cancer, at one point, and I remember them talking about how sprouts were even more nutritional than just a vegetable. You know, like if you could get the broccoli sprout that is more nutrient dense than just broccoli. So I've been on a quest for like 5 years to find sprouts, and I'm like, you can't find them as seeds. Like I don't know how to get this. And then I forget to look it up online because I'm sure you could order some. But
yeah,
it's
it's
kind
pretty
of fun.
easy.
Is that
Yeah, it's
like,
easy.
is there a good website?
You know what? I should have the dad. We've been talking about, so we're hoping to build a library of courses on our website. And that's fourcornerscommunityschool.org. I'm sure we'll link it, but we're hoping to build a library of courses, and we're talking about having him, create a course so that we can, again, another way to fundraise so that we can get our school. We want to do permaculture. We want to have a whole, yeah, like a whole thing, a whole community thing, like it be a hub of our area too. So, but
Have you
but yeah, I'm sure.
have you found
I was
that
gonna say,
homeschooling has grown in your area?
yes, we get
Which is
new inquiries every week.
Which is funny because so I'm in New York and we definitely have had a growth in homeschoolers ever since really 2018, 2019 when Cuomo took away our vaccine religious exemptions. So you can't just say, "Oh, because of my religion, we're going to skip out on part of the schedule, the whole schedule." And there's 5 states that you have to get every vaccine in order to go to school. But the other 45, and I don't think people realize this, the other 45 states, you do not have to get anything on the CDC schedule in order to attend school, but you can do a religious exemption. But so I'm interested. It's interesting that in Florida, you have a lot of freedoms down there, and yet still the homeschool community is growing. Why do you think that is?
Well, we just had introduced the last 2 school years the PEP scholarship. And so the money that is normally given to public schools to support your child's education, if you decide to homeschool, is given directly to the parents. So the
How much is
last couple
that? What
of
does that look
years,
like?
it's about $8,000 per child. And so you get the scholarship is handled through a government website, and you don't just get the cash. Like you have to either get a reimbursement or you go through their scholarship site to buy supplies. But that pays for tutoring, music lessons, karate, dance, horseback riding lessons, curriculum, all kinds of stuff. So we got that this year. The first year I didn't do it because I was a little like sus, like
Yeah, like are there going to be strings attached to this?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I wanted to give it a year to see, and then it seemed legit, and so we signed up this year, and it's been really great because now we have access to really top tier tutoring. So my kids are now doing tutoring 2 days a week with this beautiful woman, and women actually it's two different, and it's something we couldn't have afforded otherwise, and it's been really great to have access to that. As it should be. The public school system shouldn't be getting money for my children.
Yeah. You know what they did at the public school down the road from me? They had a budget. No, they had a budget increase last year and they had another proposal for a budget increase this year. And everybody went and voted no. So what they did is the following month, they had a revote and oh, look, it passed this time. I'm like, are
Hmm.
you kidding me? I mean, there's some sketchiness going on there. One, you can't just have a revote. Oh, I didn't like the way that turned out. Let's have a revote. And now all of a sudden it's a yes. All these people that didn't want to increase their taxes yet again. And it's to put in stupid stuff like, oh, we're redoing the turf on the track or the football field or whatever it is. I mean, it's like, are they reading when they graduate? Can they read? Like that would be the more important stuff. So it's just angersome. But yes, I've had people on the podcast before say, be very wary of accepting any sort of government funds. And I know there's different ways that they come through too. So sometimes I'm not sure what PEP stands for, but sometimes there's vouchers. Sometimes it's a tax credit when you file your taxes. Sometimes it's actually a check and just here used as, for whatever. So I don't know. Yeah, there's different ways. And I know even in some states, and they might call it like a charter. I've heard people refer to it as we do a charter. So it's kind of like they have a middleman, but they have said to me that the curriculum that the school will accept, it cannot be Christian based at all. So if they're doing the good and the beautiful curriculum, they have to lie and say they're doing something else because it's
Well, that
through this
the good
site.
and the good and the beautiful is what their tutor uses, and it is available. Yeah, Florida doesn't play around like a lot of the other
Yeah.
states.
No, that's great. That's so interesting. Okay, so how did you go from well, all right, this is a good question. Co-op or the co-ops are tough, right? And if you're the one organizing the co-op, I would imagine it's even more tough for you because have you had to say to people like you're not a good fit, please stop coming? Or maybe you have a parent teaching something or you hire somebody to teach something in the co-op and like you're not working out, kids are dropping out, I'm not making the money anymore, sayonara. Like it's like having a business. How has that worked out for you?
Yeah, well, most of it's worked itself out. We're very open and accepting. We've had a couple of adults with disabilities that have joined in. We've had kids with, severe autism, and we're very welcoming. And the people that haven't fit have just found their way out. And usually it's the ones that think we're too hippie or woo woo.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, if people don't vibe, they find their way out.
Mhm.
We've had qigong teachers. We do some fun, interesting things there, and if it bothers people, they just move on. We haven't actually had to kick anybody out, so it's all worked itself out. Anytime we're very big on the socio emotional learning aspect, and we do a group circle every morning with all ages. So we have ages babies to 13, and then one disabled adult. Like I said, right now at this point, all the parents are involved in the circle. We do brain games in the morning, which is what they do in China to have like the left and right hemispheres work together. And yeah, so we have a very strong flavor, I would say. And so either
Mhm.
you vibe or you don't vibe. But
Mhm.
currently we have a lot of people that vibe.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I asked the last guest I had about this too on my podcast because she was a teacher in England, or I'm gonna get it wrong 'cause it's like England, Wales, and she was somewhere over there. But she left her teaching job because she was like, "I can't work for this system anymore." And she's in the Dominican Republic and has her own school. And same thing, she was saying the morning, it's this very much like getting in touch with our feelings. And I asked her, I said, "Well, where is the line? Because now we have a nation of like middle schoolers, high schoolers, college kids that can't regulate their emotions at all. And it's I'm triggered. I can't process that. I can't. And so when people hear socio emotional learning, they almost get like, ooh, I don't know. We don't want to like coddle the kids and tell them that they can't function. We want to give them the empowerment. But she explained it beautifully. And I want to hear your answer too. Where is the difference in that to where it's like a healthy thing versus we're just going to coddle kids that can't handle life?
I think really that it has nothing to do with coddling. It's about learning about your emotions. How many adults do you know that don't know how to recognize the emotion that they're feeling?
Right.
So, and this is what I do is in my coaching business with women. I mean, there's so many adults out there that can't even recognize what's happening in their body when they get angry. They can't even name where in their body they're feeling the emotion
Mhm.
or what that emotion is, you know? And so getting in touch with your emotions and understanding your emotions has nothing to do with coddling in any way. And it's also the social aspect of that is how do we deal with another person when we have conflict with them? You
Mm,
know?
very true.
How do we get past differences and work with each other? And so that's a big part of it. We're really, and I think as I said before when I was introducing the idea, it's like I am doing this so that my kids can have that social experience because they're going to be out in the world dealing with lots of different type of people. And I can tell you the first disabled adult that we had in, she was a 21-year-old young lady and she was confined to a wheelchair. And she had probably cognitive abilities of, maybe like a 5-year-old. And it was very different for the kids at first. And as they learned to navigate that and to ask questions and to be curious and become accepting, this girl just became part of the group. And it was
Mm,
so good for her and her mother. And, I don't know how many years she had probably felt outside, and then to come into that group was just so nourishing for both of
Hmm.
them. And so to learn to navigate these differences, and you're not always going to get along with somebody, and there are conflicts that happen between the kids, especially with so many kids. And learning to navigate that, I think, is just so important.
And do you think I've had a psychologist tell me before that part of the social emotional learning in school, there's actually an agenda behind it where parents don't realize, like it comes across as we're learning how to deal with the emotions, we're learning how to identify them. And then the agenda pushes through further in the year, like more into a sexual thing where it's inappropriate. And I think that's what scares parents, because she actually had told me that she took her daughter out of the social emotional learning part of that, was in the same school actually as the one down the street from me. And so her daughter like sat out because she read the curriculum beforehand. They had to sign a permission slip saying that their kids would be part of it, and she didn't sign it. But then I'm thinking, well, gee, how much is her daughter missing out on? Because a lot of this sounds like beneficial things. And I wonder if there's an agenda in the school to like, okay, then
That's, yeah,
let's
that's
slip it.
so interesting.
Well, it was, slipping in like, are you feeling today like you're the gender that you're supposed to be? And if you're not, it's okay. You can tell me, the teacher, you don't have to tell your parents, sort of thing. I mean, that's putting it very
Wow.
abruptly. I'm sure this is over time, but yeah, her daughter was in the first grade and she was like, I asked for the curriculum and I read through it all and I asked for her to not to be a part of it, which, alienates her child too, because then her daughter's missing out on
That's
probably beneficial things. But yeah,
That's crazy to me. Okay, so I took 3 levels of developmental psychology in college, and none of that was ever introduced. None of that
yeah.
was ever talked about. And so to me, that's like shocking
I
that
wonder if
they're
they're
adding that into that curriculum.
almost
It's,
sneaking
yeah,
its way in. And I wonder, is it just New York? Because we have a very, like, I don't know, crazy people in power here. I
yeah.
don't know if it's all, worldwide, but I thought that was very interesting for her to tell me. But yeah,
I have never heard of that, but I'm pretty separated. I try to stay out of the drama, I try to stay out
yeah,
of the news. I went deep in some rabbit holes in like 2020 to 2023, and I got a little like, I'm going to pull back and just
yeah,
concentrate on the joy in life. I got
yeah.
too much in the politics, and I was like, yeah, and the conspiracy. I just, oh, so I had to
It
I
can
had to take a
swallow you
step
up.
back. Yeah, yeah. I felt
Yeah,
that it was, I mean, and I learned so much. I went down so many rabbit holes, and there's so much more I know about how the world works and how the government works,
yeah,
and just like we were talking about World War II and all the things that have been kept from us.
yeah.
And yeah, again, that's like a whole podcast to go down
Well,
that rabbit hole.
yeah. And yeah, in that I think if we all had the understanding that there's not really a right or a left, it's like, okay, opposite sides to the same coin. They've got the same people running both sides. It's like
Bingo.
trying to tell you to drink Coke or drink Pepsi. I mean, they're both owned by the same people. All the news networks are owned by the same people, whether it's Fox or CNN, it's the same people on the top. But if they can divide us, they can. And yeah, it's interesting. It's such a crazy world to raise our kids in. And I try to think back to like my grandmother's days where, she was in Poland hiding from German and Russian soldiers. And of course you're worried that like, okay, are they going to put a bomb on us or whatever? But we just have such a different type of warfare today. And it's hard to have kids in it and to be on top of all that.
And
So
they're
how big?
conducting it. Oh, sorry, I was going to say they're conducting it in the school system. So what you're saying about them sneaking that agenda into the curriculum, that is part of the warfare, because
Yeah,
they are brainwashing, psychologically damaging our children, and creating a whole generation, or probably 2 generations now, of kids that are just so confused. And it's so
confused.
sad. It's such. I mean, yeah, it's tragic.
It is. No, I really feel that they do want to break up the family unit, because when you don't have a strong family unit, you look to your government for guidance. And, so that, yeah, it all does kind of fit together. But like you said, you can't go down too deep on the rabbit holes because it will swallow you up and you'll get a little frustrated. So, yeah, what do you think is most important? Having the kids grow food, not only just to know how to be self-sufficient if there was ever a need, a hurricane, a attack from anybody, you couldn't get to a grocery store, growing food and just the satisfaction of that. I know you talked about the sprouts. Is that something that you work with your kids on or in the co-op?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that we want to buy land, that we want to establish our own schoolhouse is for that reason. We want to teach sustainability, and we've brought it into our, we don't have a curriculum, but we brought it into our teachings a lot over the years. But we ultimately want to create a little homestead that the school runs
Hmm.
and teach the kids. We're very big on teaching the kids entrepreneurial skills, and we do markets. The kids make and sell things. That's part of our fundraising efforts. The kids, make crafts and other items, and we sell them. We've done probably 4 or 5 art shows where the kids have done art and sold art. And we would like them to sell eggs, have their own farmers market, do farm to table. So ultimately, as our kids grow, my 11-year-old daughter and my partner Mandy's 10-year-old son, they're in the senior class. And as they grow, their capabilities and needs change and grow. And as they move into their teen years, we want them to learn to be more self sufficient and to run their own businesses. And the idea is to really create a hub where not just the kids come to learn, but the whole community comes together and participates, where we have classes for all ages, where we have workshops, where, we have events, farm to table and things like that. So we have a big dream, and this has been the dream the whole time. So that's what we're working towards.
Oh, I love that. So where can people find you if they're in the area or just kind of want to follow along with what you're doing so that they can maybe replicate it where they are?
So we are in the North Central Florida area, and we're in a tiny little town called Keystone Heights. And like I said, Four Corners Community School.org is our website. We have a pretty big Facebook following, and we do a lot of posting on there. So that's really a good place to go to actually see what we're doing, because we post about all the adventures that the kids are having. And that's just Four Corners Community School on Facebook. And yeah, we're looking for angel donors. We're looking for ideas about, land where we could, get this started. I don't know if we're necessarily tied to the Keystone Heights area. We'd even talked about taking it international. So yeah, anybody that wants to get involved, please reach out.
Okay, and I can leave that information in the show's description as well. So they can find you on Facebook and look at your website. Any other last words that you want to let parents know? Maybe the parent that's like, I want to homeschool, but it just seems so far-fetched. What if my kid resents me? What would you say to them?
Oh gosh, you'll never regret it. You'll never regret it. That's
What about on the hard days? What do you tell them to get through those?
It's my personal belief that on the hardest days, it's never as hard to me as sending my children away from me to have someone else raise them,
Yeah, that's so true. And
because that's heartbreaking.
what about to the mom like me that nobody ever taught how to regulate emotions or identify where the feelings are coming from, crazy upbringing, and when things are just like, mom, 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 and I need this, I need that, and you're trying to get something done in your day. What is your number one recommendation for that person, that mom or dad, to do? Identify or regulate or just help the situation? Because downing a bottle of vodka isn't a good idea. So what else can we do that's actually healthy?
I love that question, because this is actually what I do in my coaching, and all the time I'm talking about this. So one of my number one tips is to give yourself a parent timeout. And so that would be when you feel those emotions rising up, when you feel that heat coming up your body, to take a deep breath and say, mommy needs to take a few minutes to herself. And, rather than sending the kid away and making the kid feel less than, punished, unloved, giving yourself a timeout, and whatever that looks like to you, to go outside, not drink a bottle of vodka, go outside and stand in the sunshine, look at the sunshine. Go, if you have to go and lock yourself in the bathroom
Yes, I was
and
gonna say
do a little
they'll follow
breathing.
me out there. You know that, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I have a porch that locks. I can go outside if I need to. And your kids get used to it also. When you say mommy needs a breather, mommy needs a timeout, then they learn to respect that because you come back in 2 minutes and you're regulated, that emotional regulation. And the second thing I would say, the second most important, is to actually be able to identify, to learn those triggers and to stop it before they actually come up. Before you get to that place where you feel like you want to explode, start getting in touch with your own emotions and learn what it feels like when they first start coming up. And, oh, maybe I need to do some breathing. Maybe I need to do some tapping.
Okay. Breathing, tapping, identifying. Perfect. And do you do coaching for anyone? Is that a link that you want to provide as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my website is NicoleGoffSpeaks.com. I'm on Instagram, Nicole Desiree Goff, and also Nicole Desiree Goff on Facebook. But yeah, absolutely would love to provide a link. So
Sure. Yeah. We'll put
yeah.
that link in there. Nicole, thank you so much. Hour sped by. So I looked up and I was like, oh my goodness, we have to end this already. Thank you. This has been so much fun to hear. I love this perspective and all of the fun things that we can do, the co-ops and, really homeschooling. You've never been surrounded by more homeschoolers than we have right now. It's the time to do it.
Yeah.
Join the revolt from the public school system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And join me on my podcast too. So we didn't go there. I have a podcast, so
Ooh.
Ecstatic Life. It's all about practices, modalities, products, lifestyles that bring more joy into your motherhood experience, but more I'm expanding into just your human experience. So I'd love to have
Ooh,
you on to
I
talk about
love that.
homeschooling.
I love that because I was a government worker for 16 years and I
Ooh,
up and left it to homeschool the kids. I was like, I don't think I can do this, but you know what? It has been so worth it. Even the hard days, like you said, because at least I'm there. I'm not sitting in a
yep.
cubicle waiting for the clock to just keep ticking.
Yep.
Awesome. I would love to do that. All right. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on.